When I got into rowing, I was still not walking long distances. I was using a cane fairly often, and it hurt most of the time, but it was worth it to learn how to row, to put myself through a little torture. And as it turns out, it's been the best thing that's ever happened to me. And it would never have happened to me if I hadn't quit flying. My name is Caroline Basket, born and raised in Springfield, Ohio. Pretty ordinary childhood. Had a mother and a father. My mother was always out flying. My father was always at work. I didn't realize that my mother was a pilot until I was in a back bathroom in the house and saw an airshow poster. And it had her maiden name, which said Carol Bailey, world champion aerobatic pilot, and gave the dates 41 and 42, I believe. I guess I started flying when I was about 16. I started the first round of flying and ended up not finishing then. And I graduated from high school when I was 16, a year early. Then I went to a number of colleges and ended up here in Boston, and that's where I finished all of my flight programs. I had my private pilot's license, but I got my commercial ratings, and finally got a job flying.
I'm Wayne Mansfield, and I run a company called Aviad here in North Andover, Massachusetts. One day, Carol Gray Bosco came and visited us, I think because she was interested in the unique airplanes we fly, the open cockpit biplanes. And as an aerobatic pilot, and the daughter of a very famous aerobatic pilot, she was interested in seeing what we had. And after a while, she started to work for us. Initially, she flew beach patrol and used to broadcast reports for beach traffic conditions and beach conditions in the summertime. And then she started to fly aerial banners with us. And then finally, we bought a 600 horsepower open cockpit Stearman biplane, which is a really unique plane. And she began to fly that. Carol Gray is a really unique person because people who fly these unique airplanes that we fly, Stearmans, and especially those converted to huge engines like ours with 600 horsepower, in the general aviation populace might be 1 in 1,000. Given that women are 10% of the pilot population, that makes it 1 in 10,000. And certainly of those, she's one of the better pilots I've ever seen, skilled, confident, and aggressive. One cold windy day in November, we came into work and took a look at the conditions and decided we could fly, but we started to change a lot of things for that day, where the planes flew, how we do it. And then at the last moment, we changed the schedule. We started to move banners around on the airfield. At the time of the event, I took off and Carol Gray came around and followed closely behind me. I came down and picked up my banner, and as I did, her banner got blown in the wind onto mine. And when I pulled up, I looked back and there were 2 banners tangled behind me. I watched it fall, and momentarily it went across her wings and her plane spun like a top, crashed into the ground. And I watched with horror as I saw the top wings come down through the wing struts and the engine come off in the middle of the runway, and the fuel began to vaporize and the steam and smoke pour up from the plane. I felt terrified. This was somebody I thought a lot of. I came back to close the airfield. I came back, I landed, taxied as close as I could to the scene, jumped out of the plane and ran over and saw my crew, 3 or 4 guys walking away from the plane. And that was the thing that really frightened me because I couldn't see Carol Gray and I thought they left her in the cockpit because it was so gruesome. But when I get closer, I discovered they were carrying her away. And there she was, her usual self, being as feisty as ever and screaming about her right leg and how it hurt, and her left leg and how it hurt, and about her back and about her shoulder. So we put her on the ground. She waited for the ambulance, which arrived a very long 4 or 5 minutes later. And we took her to the hospital and we took her away.
Why my right leg was pretty well smashed because it took most of the impact from the crash. So broke both ankles, compression fracture in my back, messed up my knee, busted my transponder in half of my forehead, broke my left shoulder, and that landed me in the hospital. So I crashed in 1986, and I think I went for my last surgery in 1991. They had originally fused my ankle in a high-heeled position, not a high heel, but a pump, as if I were to wear a pump. But when you think about that, you can't walk flat-footed. I mean, you can't get out of your bed barefoot and walk to the bathroom flat-footed. You have to put on shoes. So it's a pretty miserable position to be in. So we went out to the Mayo Clinic to see if they could refuse it in a better position. And it was also giving me pressure sores on the outside of the thumb. So while I was out there, they scheduled me for surgery on Monday. We were there on Friday. And over the weekend, my doctor went to a convention and said when he got back that I just had to go meet this guy. There was this amazing doctor that was doing this great surgery with a thing called an Elizarov. And it's an external fixator. And they cauterize the bone. And then they can pull it apart and bone regenerates in between where they've sliced it. And you go back every 2 weeks and you turn screws every day, half turn, quarter turn, whatever they say. And it changes the position of the ankle and it grows the bone lengthwise. It's just an amazing procedure. So they did that. And by the time I was finished, the ankle was pretty good. It was in a pretty good position. But of course, then you're in crutches again and the same old thing. I had to be in a half cast for a long time after that so that the bone would solidify. And that's when I saw my first head of Charles. It was one of those eureka, looking for a sport, looking for something to do. And we had volunteered for the Head of Charles, a friend of mine. And we were watching the races, and I was completely inspired. Decided I had to do it. So we went to a CRI. I did my first Learn to Row class in, I believe it was the beginning of 92. And at the time, since I had a fused ankle, and most of the rowing stroke requires that you bend your ankle, I used to tie a block of wood to the bottom of my foot, and then I velcroed my foot to the shoe that was already existing in the boat, and so that when I came up to the catch, I wasn't on my tippy toes. I had something to push off of rather than tip with my toes. So I did that for quite a while, and it was okay. It wasn't great, but it sufficed. And I learned basic rowing, and before you know it, I decided I had to compete. So then, of course, races entered into it. And I decided after about a year or two that I had to get a foot stretcher that I could move in and out of the boat that would pivot. So I finally found this guy at MIT, Vicky Pirelli. He's a great guy, and he built my first foot stretcher. And from then on, I haven't looked back.